So the butterfly animation is kind of robbed from that Typolution clip that I put up on the assignment page there, and the butterflies in that assignment are just made from the letter B. And the letter B is used for the wings of the butterfly. First thing you might do is just find a suitable type font. So you can do that, just select it and then go into your text field and just tab down until you see something that looks nice and butterfly-ish. So I'll use this one. Now you can change these afterwards. That's the handy thing about After Effects, so it'll still allow you to modify that afterwards. Okay, so I have one letter, and what I want to do is I want to start the flapping motion with this particular letter or this wing, and then rather than try and do that again a second time, I'm going to just use a duplicate of the first wing for the second wing's movements, which should allow it to be very symmetrical. Now the first thing I'm going to have to do is think about, well, where is the center of rotation for the butterfly's wing? Well, that is going to be somewhere around here. Now I can use license here because it's a type animation. It's not supposed to look like a real butterfly, so I'm going to have the rotation slightly away from the B. So it needs to rotate around that point there. Now I want it to flap basically, so it's going to have to be set to a 3D layer. I can't do much with this in 2D, so I'll set that to 3D and I get my three axes there. So straight away you can see that it's the y-axis here that's going to do the work for the flapping motion. So I'm just going to be keyframing the Y rotation property. So I can pull up my rotation there and keyframe the Y. Just put a keyframe. I'm going to go back and do the timing of the flapping afterwards. So I'm just going to set it up first. So the first keyframe actually will be an up position. Then I'll go out 1 second, a down position, and as you know by now, it's just a matter then of copying and pasting. That's not going at real time, but we can come back and fix that afterwards. Okay. Now, the other thing I can do at this point, if I want to smoothen out the movement of the flapping, is just to change these all to easy ease, and that will kind of, when it gets to the top, it will slow down, and then before it starts to flap in the opposite direction. Okay, I'm not getting much joy with the rendering, so I'll just play it back there with the playhead. I'll put it into a lower resolution, maybe it might give me a little bit more real-time playback. There we go. Okay, so that's not too bad. I mean, I can come back and retime these together as a group of wings a little bit later on. Now the next thing I'm going to do is duplicate that, Command D, and open up its own, well, I'll open up both rotation properties there so I can see all my keyframes. Now the problem here is that my left wing and my right wing are still both on one side of the butterfly. So what I need to do is I need to first of all get a view that allows me to kind of look along the wing, and so that I can see if my animations are matching up perfectly. So what I would do here is I would set up another view looking up from behind the wing so I can look down along it, and I want to have my active camera also visible, so I'll split the views into two views horizontal, and I'll specify that my left view is bottom. Okay, so now I can see the flapping. So it starts at the top. No, it's not particularly visible there. I'll zoom in a little bit so you can just about barely see it there. It's hard to see on the screen. When I move it out, you'll see that it flaps down as the wing flaps down away from us. Now what I need to do is I need to set this up in such a way that I now have a second wing going in this direction. If someone would hit the overhead lights, you might be able to see the screen a little bit better. Okay, so there's a lot of ways that I tried to do this, parenting to nulls and all kinds of things, before I realized that it was actually the simplest way of doing it was just to modify all of the keyframes simultaneously on my second my second wing. So you can see I've got the keyframes selected there, all of them. For B2 I'm on a keyframe, so that means that I can now rotate until that is up there, and now the two wings. So what I've done is I've taken the rotation between here and here, and I've just moved it all the way around there by selecting all of my keyframes. So it's just like repositioning a position animation. You select all the keyframes, make sure your playhead is on one of those keyframes, and then what you're doing is you're modifying all of the properties within those keyframes simultaneously. Remember, if you have the playhead off the keyframes, all you're going to do is create a new keyframe and create what would look like a very erratic type of animation. So now that's the flapping of the wings. Okay, so what I can do now is I can select all of these keyframes. Actually, before I do, I just added an extra kind of a touch into it. I didn't want it just to flap down and up at the same speed, because in my mind there's a faster flap down as the butterfly tries to force the air from under the wings, and it creates a little bit more of a nicer animation. So the way that you do that is you just, for the down part, pull the keyframes a little bit closer. So it looks like that, and then you're just copying all of those, and whoops, I don't want to do that. Okay. Okay, so far so good. I have a set of flapping butterfly wings, and they're matched up and they're symmetrical. Next thing I need to do is find a way of creating a unified butterfly object here that I can move around, rotate, resize, rescale, do whatever, and that's through the use of a null object. So what I'll do is I'll create the null object next, and again, just this it isn't entirely necessary, but I like to have things kind of centered so I can visually make sense of what it is I'm trying to do. So I'm going to center the null here and then drag its anchor point back into the center. Now this needs to be 3D as well, because I want to be able to move this around in 3D space. And the last thing I need to do then is to parent B and B2, which I could rename now to right wing and left wing, but I won't for the moment. Okay, so once I've got that done, any change I make on the null object will be reflected throughout the two parented objects. In this case, the two B's. So it's quite simple, really. It's just getting into the keyframes and, you know, problem solving your way around that side of it. Now the last thing that you can do with this then is to keyframe the actual object in terms of moving the butterfly. So a simple way to do that is just to get the position property open on the butterfly and get my arrow tool, pull it back on my first keyframe, and then towards the end of the flapping I'll have the butterfly some bit off in the distance, and I could, you know, play around with that as well, do my S curve. Okay. Now the last thing I would do then is to start playing around with cameras. You can create as many cameras as you want to look at this butterfly, and depending on how you adjust the camera's position, you can have, you know, the butterfly centered here and then starts to move off in that direction. Now it's not great, so you can see a bit of a flaw there, but as it moves along, you might need to change its orientation using the rotation of the null there as well. Okay, so there's a few more elements here that you need to change to get that to perfectly move in the direction you want. But the camera, as I say, you can keyframe its orientation, its position, so you can do kind of orbiting shots, and then you can have a static shot if you want of the butterfly moving off, like the example on Blackboard.